G'day, and welcome to Pints with Aquinas. My name is Matt Fradden. I'm wearing this ghastly kangaroo sweater again today, but I've put a little coat over it just in case any of you are so disgusted you wouldn't be able to make it through the rest of the show. I'm excited to have John Edwards on the show today, who I'll introduce in a minute. John is a really amazing guy, and he's got an amazing story, and when he told it to me, I cried like a baby, but in a really manly way. So that's... I'll introduce him soon. We'll chat with him for about half hour, and then we will take some of your questions. So buckle up for that. But before we do anything else, I want to say a big thank you to EL Investments, Ethos Logos Investments. Do you want to feel good about your investments? It doesn't matter if you've never invested before or if you've been investing for decades. Ethos Logos Investments makes it easy to invest in portfolios that are good for you both financially and spiritually. We know from Jesus' parable of the talents that Christians are called to exercise good stewardship over their money. We also know we are called to live our faith and to love our neighbor as ourself. This means investing wisely while avoiding profiting from things like abortions, embryonic stem cell research, and human trafficking. Ethos Logos Investments works hard to make the process painless and understandable so you can feel confident in how you're investing and proud of the impact you're making through your investments. So wherever you are on your financial journey, head over to elinvestments.net/pints. There is a link in the description below. Click that. We even did a little video about investing. If you've never invested before, if it terrifies you, but you know you should be doing it, go click that link. You can watch that little video. And you'll see why Ethos Logos Investments is the clear choice for Christians from all walks of life. Again, head over to elinvestments.net/pints and let Ethos Logos Investments help you to invest with character. Securities offered through Securities America Inc., members FINRA, SIPC, Securities America, and Ethos Logos Investments are separate bloody entities. Boom! John Edwards, how you going?
Pretty good. How are you, Matt? It's good to be with you.
Yes, I really mean it when I say I'm just so thrilled to have you on the show. I can't wait to share your fantastic and powerful story with people. But before we do that, maybe give us a quick introduction to who you are. I've put a link in the description to your website as well.
All right. Well, first of all, my name is John Edwards. I'm the founder of Pew Ministries, and I'm the host of the Just a Guy on the Pew podcast. I'm also one of the co-founding partners of the Virtual Catholic Conference. But I'm a guy that spends most of my time now in full-time ministry, trying to serve the church and trying to reach other men. You know, there's a lot of men out there that are in the place that are close to the place that I've been in my life before, that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. But that's how I love to spend my time, just giving back to others in the church and trying to help people that have lost their way and build a healthy and lasting relationship with Jesus Christ.
Beautiful. Well, as you said, you've been part of this these kind of online conferences that have been taking place, and you helped run ours, the Pints with Aquinas one, and we did this awesome conference in the North Georgia mountains, and we had that distillery come, if you remember.
Yes, I do. I do remember. I didn't have that much of the distillery, so I do remember.
Yes, but there was a lot of whiskey tasting and things like that. It was fantastic. And at some point in the night, you just started sharing your story with me, and I had absolutely no idea what you had been through, and you know what the Lord had done in your life. And it was kind of a funny story because I guess at one point somebody asked Neil, my camera guy, because you know we were all sitting around having a smoke, chatting. Somebody asked Neil to go get something from me. I guess I had a cigar in my pocket. And so he walks over to me. I didn't notice. He turned around and walked back. And they're like, "Did you get it?" And he's like, "Matt's crying. I don't want to interrupt him." So you were telling your story, and I was just like so moved.
Yeah.
Man. So it was just so powerful to kind of get to know you over those few days. But yeah, I just want to kind of give you the opportunity to maybe take us back and lead us through your story.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that was a great week, and we had a lot of fun, and that was just a great event that you guys put on with us at VCC, and just enjoyed it. But yeah, I think I was sitting there talking. I think Cameron, your wife, came over and was talking to me, and she asked me. She said, "John, like you're here with us and all this, and VCC, how did you get into this stuff and how this happened?" And I just made a little joke. I said, "Well, I used to do a lot of coke," and she just looked at me and said, "What?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "You're kidding, right?" And I said, "No, that's kind of the truth. Like, that's how this whole started." And she just all of a sudden started asking me about it. And about 3 seconds into it, she's like, "Matt, get over here."
Is that how that happened?
Yeah, that's what she said. So you came over and sat down. But I mean, I was born and raised here in Memphis, Tennessee. born and raised Baptist. It was in the church for the first 18 years of my life. Had a smorgasbord of an upbringing, really. Like I went to an Episcopal school, just in the part of town we lived in Memphis. It's my parents wanted us to go to a private school, so that's where we went. But I was raised Baptist. But most of my friends were in the Baptist church. That's where I spent most of my time. For whatever reason at school, I guess because I was so into church, that wasn't the most popular thing at school. So I didn't have a lot of friends and refuge there. So I found my way into the church, and I was there every time the door opened, 3 or 4 times a week. And from a young age, like from being a toddler, I can remember, having these sets of friends all the way up through youth group and all of that until 18. And, living here in Memphis, it's sort of a melting pot of people that parents went to all these different universities and schools around the area, SEC schools like Georgia and Alabama and all that. And so when it came time to be, when we were 18 years old, people just started to say, I'm going off to Mississippi State or Alabama or wherever. And very quickly, I realized my community was disappearing. That's where I spent all my time on, mission trips and evangelizing at a young age. I loved it and I loved my faith. But I started to realize things were about to change, and I had no idea what to do in my life. Like I wasn't one of those guys that knew I wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or any of that. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do in 3 minutes, let alone for the rest of my life. But so all of my friends just started leaving, and so it left me wondering what to do. And my father had worked for Napa Auto Parts, actually headquarters there in Atlanta, not far from where you are, but he worked there for 45 years, and he told me at 16, he's like, well, you need to get a job in the summers to have something to do. So I started working there. And then a year and a half later is when all this took place with everybody leaving. So I knew that I had a job and I was going to do that. But I also wanted to go to school, so I just enrolled at the University of Memphis. It's a commuter college here in Memphis. A lot of people go there. But as I said, all my friends had left. So I go to this college campus, and for the first year, I did pretty well. I had a 3.5 or something like, maybe it was 2.5. I might be exaggerating, but something along those lines. But I was in school there, and I just right off the bat, man, for the first time in my life, I realized like I'm surrounded by thousands of people, and I don't know a soul. And I remember sitting in these classes and just like seeing these beautiful girls I wanted to talk to, and they wouldn't talk to me, and looking around and had no friends. And so I remember one day, one of these beautiful girls I was trying to talk to over and over again in the class to get rejected by constantly, would talk to guys that had Greek letters on their shirts. So I thought, well, you know what? Maybe I ought to get one of those, right? So
were you into sports back then, John? Because you're a big dude.
Yeah, I'm 6'8", a little bit heavier than I used to be.
Crikey.
Yeah. But I played basketball, I played football, I played baseball, all those things. That was one of my dreams, was to play basketball in college, but actually had a knee injury in high school and wasn't able to go any further in that. But yeah, I love sports, all those things. But in college here, I got in there, and next thing I know, I said, well, I know one person left here, and he happens to be the rush chairman for a fraternity. So I called him. He said, hey, we're fixing to rush people. Come on over. And Matt, that was really one of the worst decisions I made in my life in some regards, because it was then that I started to forget my faith. It was the last time that I went to church for about 10 years. I started to look to make friends and do anything that it took to make those friends, right? Like I had this job.
Just quick question, John. How did you go from someone who was like super into your faith as a Baptist? By the way, I love how you pronounce Baptist. I hear there's Baptists and Baptists. Sounds like you were the latter. That's awesome. And you're on mission trips and things like that. Was there a kind of like slow decline in your faith before you joined this fraternity, or was there something that happened when you joined that led you to think, I'm just not going to go to church anymore?
Well, part of it was at my church, it was a predominantly older congregation. So you basically had young adult stuff, and then you had like my parents' age people that were going to Sunday school and those type things. So as I looked around, there was no next step in the church for me. If I was to continue going to Sunday school, the things that we did in the Protestant Baptist church, there was no group for me to go to next, unless I wanted to go sit in a room with my parents and their friends, and who wants to do that at 18 years old? So really all that was left was going to the service at 10:30 every Sunday. So I just found myself not going more and more. I was an adult. I could make my own decisions. And so I just started saying, you know what kept me going to the church, at least through that part of my life, was that community and that fellowship, and it wasn't there anymore. So I began to look for that in other places. And that's where I found it, was in that fraternity. I started drinking and doing all sorts of drugs. A lot of people were smoking dope and doing different things. And I had progressed in my job with Napa. I continued to work that. And at the time, about 20 years old, I was making $35,000 a year as a kid in college. I'd
Yeah.
make my way up through running the warehouse shipping department and things like that for them. So I had all this money, which a lot of kids in college don't. It's like
Right.
I'm there and I have, I want booze, I want all these things, but I have no way to buy them. So when people found out that I had the means, all of a sudden, guess what? A lot of people started to
Quick.
like me, to want to be friends with me, and so that's
Yeah.
I
Just want
started
to
to realize.
interject here and say, like, were you? Did you ever do drugs in high school?
I smoked some pot.
Okay,
Like
just a little
that
bit.
was,
So
yeah, I
what
had a,
was it like? What was your relationship with your parents like at this point? Like, did you think I should did you worry about them knowing about this, and
oh
what
yeah,
was kind of going
sure.
through your head as you were kind of descending into all this stuff?
I was definitely afraid of a lot of that. Like my parents were good people. They taught me well. I just chose to make some decisions that they would not have been proud of. And quite frankly, Matt, looking back, I'm not proud of either. But yeah, I worried about it. I smoked weed. There was a buddy of mine in high school, my senior year, that sort of introduced me to it. And it became a habitual thing. And then I started to drink a little bit there, but nothing like when I went to college. But of course, that, you hear so often that weed's not a big deal, right? Like smoking dope's not a big deal. It's not like
Yeah.
doing other drugs. Well, I got to tell you, if I had never opened the door to that, I don't think I would have ever opened the door to the rest of it. To be honest with you, I think that's a load of crap. When people say that weed's something you shouldn't worry about, because it does. It just it allows you to say I'm okay with this, and
Yeah.
it's like sin, right? When I become okay with a sin, then I become okay with other sins, and then the doors fling open, and next thing you know, I'm mired down in sin. And it's the same way with drugs.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
So.
sense. Yeah. Okay.
hmm
So,
So I mean,
another quick question, because you were involved in your Christian faith. You started to kind of. Did you have any friends from church, like when you went off to university, that you were still in touch with? No.
a couple, but they were all out of town. So it was
Okay.
really, we would have phone calls and things like that. I had a real close friend of mine named Adam that, I mean, we were inseparable, like all the summers and everything. We grew up together and were best friends, but he went off to a college outside of Memphis. And, it just sort of, he started going on with his life and I started going on with mine. And as those things happen when you were separated from people, those relationships started to wane.
Mm.
And so I really didn't have anybody,
Mm.
other than my family here in town. So that's why I went looking for that. And I tell, high school kids all the time when I'm asked to speak to them, the talks I usually give are centered around identity and freedom. And, if I would just to say anything to people that age that might be watching this right now, if you're a senior in high school or something and your future's looming ahead of you and you're excited about it, the thing is, like, freedom's a great thing. I remember thinking I can't wait to get out on my own and live in my own apartment, do my own thing, and get away from all this and
Mm.
just going to be my own man. That's a great thing if you know who you are. But if you don't know who you are, then you're really opening up yourself to the rest of the world to tell you who you are. And that's what happened to me in college is I became whatever anybody wanted me to be,
Mm.
right? Like if they needed money, hey, you need money to get in a club, I got it, and now I'm your friend. Or you need money to buy weed or alcohol or other drugs or whatever it was, and I got it. And I had this false perception that I had all these great lasting friendships. That's the fraternity thing, right? Brothers for life.
Mm.
But I could tell you that that wasn't the case, and that they were good guys, a lot of them. But we were kids in college, and we all made mistakes and lived differently than a lot of us do now. But I could tell you that it just was. I would do anything at that point to be loved. And looking back at it, like I look at it somewhat with the relationship I had with my father too. My father was raised on a farm with 6 siblings, and sort of looking back at it, he would tell you they were almost treated as farmhands, sort of. There wasn't a lot of loves and hugs, and I'm proud of
Mm.
you. It's just sort of, you should know all that because of what I'm doing for you.
Yeah.
So I think I was always searching for approval from any place. And so I started to find it here in this fraternity and what I could do for other people. And so that opened me up to everything, just doing whatever it was to fit in, doing whatever it was to be seen as cool or to be liked by the girls that I was trying to get to like me, or the guys that were the most popular in our fraternity. So I started to make choices based on that. And I'll never forget the night that I made the choice to do cocaine. Along the way, I had done a lot of other drugs. They just seemed to sort of pour in the different years of college. Sometimes it was ecstasy, sometimes it was, pills, sometimes it was other things. But I didn't know the guys around me were doing cocaine. It was something that some of them hid.
Mm.
And one day I was over on a Sunday. We were watching the NFL or something at somebody's house and just drinking too much. And I remember walking back to a bathroom and I heard some voices in a room. The door sort of cracked and I looked, I kind of opened the door a little bit and there were lines of cocaine on this dresser. And,
Wow.
that was kind of the point, Matt, where I look back and I'm like, all those after school specials from like NBC when you were a kid start flashing before you, all those Saved by the Bell moments and stuff that you saw when you were a kid. And I thought, man, I'm not supposed to, like, this is something I don't need to be around. Like, I've messed around with a lot of other stuff, but like,
Yeah.
this is the one thing that, like, I don't know if you come back from. And I remember in that moment, just like looking down the hallway to the bathroom and looking back. And at that point, some of the guys had said, man, come on in here, and you've seen it now. And I remember actually like conversations I had with my parents sitting in the back of our car going somewhere, and Mom, I'll never do drugs. Mom, I'll
Right.
never drink, all that stuff. But for whatever reason, I made the choice. Looking back, I think it was because I drank a whole lot. And at the time, there wasn't Uber and all that other stuff. So you either had to drive yourself home or stay. So I thought, well, maybe just a little bit and it'll wake me up. Well, I did that little bit, and man, I gotta tell you, it was like I could run through a wall.
Really?
I'd never had a feeling like that before. You just jacked up and overcharged and just kind of paranoid. And so I sat there for a little while and then made it home that night. And I told myself, never again. That's it. Like, never again. But it was later that week. I was over at a friend's house, and I guess they kind of figured now, the cat's out of the bag. John's aware of it, so they started openly sort of doing it around me, and slowly and surely I found myself doing it. And I'm not trying to blame this on other people. I'm in charge of my own life. I make my own decisions, but I just started doing that, and it became like we would drink on a Friday night or a Saturday night, for a few hours, and then we'd do some of that, and then go out to a bar downtown on Beale Street or something here in Memphis to chase girls all night. But shortly over time, Matt, like that went from just that excuse to being that's all we did. Like suddenly we wouldn't go out anymore. And then it would be 1 or 2 in the morning. And then somebody else was going to get another 8-ball or something. And
Right.
it was 7 in the morning, next thing you know, and you're up all night, just sitting there disgusted with yourself the next day, but ready to do it again the next morning. So that started in my life. This whole time I was working at Genuine Parts, Napa Auto Parts, and working my way up. I made my way up to being a salesman. I was a 100% commissioned salesman, doing very well, making well over 6 figures, and salesman of the year for this Fortune 250 company a couple of times, and nobody knew. I was sort of this chameleon among men. Like I just had these masks that I would put on no matter where I went.
Were
And,
you
I was,
were you praying at the time? Was there any sense of repentance or a desire to be free and asking our Lord for the grace to be free, or not really?
well, I sort of had that Augustine mentality, right? Like,
Make me chase,
make
but
me
not
chase,
yet.
but not right now.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing. Like as this got further and further, man, and this is where I've talked to so many people about this. I do a lot of addiction talks and meetings with people, and it's very similar for everybody. Is you have those moments where you're like, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm only going to do it with this group of people, or I'm only going to do it at this time. I'm never going to buy it. I'm never going to do it on my own. And man, I sat there and watched every one of those lies collapse and fall, like one after the other. Man, you said you were never going to do that. Well, just this once. And next thing you know, once became again and again and again. And then I was buying drugs on my own. I was doing them by myself. And I knew as that was happening that this was getting out of hand, that it was getting out of control. But I just kept convincing myself, no, man, I'm making all this money and I'm doing well and I'm performing. I'm one of the best people at work. But it was tearing me up inside. And so I would have those moments, Matt, to answer your question, where the guilt the next morning or the feeling of I'm going to get caught, I would have a quick little prayer to Christ, of hey, help me to be better, but don't let me get in trouble. Don't let this hurt me. Don't let me hurt others. But I want to stop this, and just help me do it over time. But I never really meant it, right?
Yeah.
Like I never meant it. I knew I didn't mean it. That's the thing. As addicts, we know we're fooling ourselves when we're sitting there saying we don't have an issue or don't have a problem. It's just the way that we don't want to deny ourselves what we become, addicted to. So this keeps going on and on. I'm starting to do this on my own. And I start to get to the point where I'm about 25 or so. And I'm thinking, Lord, like I've aged out of the fraternity. All my friends are starting to get their own jobs. I dropped out of college. My dad kind of looked at me and said, you know what, I'm not paying for this anymore. You came home with a couple of goose eggs and, so I'm not going to pay for this. So you could just work. So that's what I did. Never finished college, but my buddies graduated and went on to doing things and married their girlfriends and things like that. And here I was trying to go to the same bars and the same places, trying to find, a lady, and wanted to move on with my life and get married and all those things. But it wasn't happening. So long story short, I walked in the bar one night to hang out with my friends and do what we normally did, do a little bit of cocaine and just to hang out. And this girl walks in the bar that I'd known from college. I hadn't seen in forever. And there was a girl in the bar too that was a friend of my little sister, had played volleyball on one of her teams with her. Came over, recognized me, said hello. Had been several years since we'd seen each other, and then went and sat down with this girl named Angela that I knew from college. Next thing you know, the girl comes back over and says, "Hey, that girl over there wants to talk to you." And it wound up being Angela, which is now my wife. And so I go over there and we sit down and we talk, and I'm not getting the whole time that she's interested in me. She's a very good looking woman. And I'm just thinking, oh, what does she want? Like, I want to get back with my buddies and do drugs and drink and stuff. But she's talking to me. And next thing you know, I got some buddies that are going to leave. And I'm like, oh, I'll go with y'all. And one of them looks at me and goes, no, I don't think you should. And I'm going, no, I'm going to go with you. Why would I stay here? You know, that kind of I was an idiot, Matt, pretty much. But anyway, I looked at her and said, you want me to stay? And she said, yes. And so we spent that night in the bar hanging out together and talking. And then I asked her out to go out the next night. We went to a movie. And next thing you know, we started dating. And before long, we're married. And Matt, like, this was what I thought was going to be the saving grace of my life. You know, I thought, like, okay, now I got to grow up. I'm going to be married and I got to be serious. And like, if she ever finds out about this, it's going to ruin everything. And I didn't stop. I didn't. I continued to do this. Like, we weren't living together until after we were married. But like, once we got married and I thought I was going to make my mind up to do this, I found myself still doing it. You know, I found myself sneaking off to the bathroom and shutting the door and taking a few lines here and there, or waiting for her to go to sleep and saying I was staying up to watch a game or something that was going late. And, you know, at this point, I was a 100% commission salesman guy. I was stressed out all the time. My money came from whether I sold something or not. And the stress of life just started pounding on me. So I found myself just doing this more and more, drinking 15, 20 beers a night. I smoked cigarettes at a time.
Stop.
Yeah.
15 to 20 beers a night.
Yeah.
What was your wife thinking as you were drinking that?
She, you know, I don't think that she ever really kept count, you know, at that point of our life. I mean, it just, she knew I was drinking, but I don't think she was ever sitting there going, okay, how many is that?
Yeah.
And I was a guy in college that drank a lot. So, I mean, I'm ashamed to say this, but I could put away a lot of beer and not act like I was drunk, right? Like it just was something else to me. And I'm a big guy, you know, I don't know if that physiologically matters, but, but anyway, I don't know. I think she knew, and she would tell you, like, looking back, she knew there was something going on, but she didn't know what to address and what it was. So we began to start talking about a family, you know, and we start talking about want to have kids. And I'm thinking, okay, this is it. Like, I can't be going to bed with my wife with this kind of stuff in my system. And, you know, what could happen to the children if they were born. And you know, I don't want to be responsible for something, you know, happening to the health of my children. So I kept telling myself I was going to stop. Right. But again, I didn't. You know, I just kept going and going and going. And so, you know, a year or so after we were married, Angela comes to tell me that we're going to have a son, my 11-year-old son now, Jacob. And I thought, this is it, right? I've wanted to be a father my whole life. You know, I wanted to have a boy. I can't wait to teach him all these things, to play basketball and all those things again. I thought I was going to stop, but I didn't. Jacob came, and here I was still doing drugs. In fact, I felt more pressure to provide and things like that, and to be better than I was. Shortly after this, Matt, my mother wound up passing away too. She was contracted breast cancer about 5 years before this. And just, you know, I watched it over the years go from her breast to her lungs to her lymph nodes and everywhere else, and eventually to her brain. Yeah. And you know, like I said, I wasn't going to church. Angela was Catholic. So, you know, she told me the man she was going to marry was going to be Catholic. So I figured I was the man of the job. So I went right to the first RCIA class I could find and
Did you really?
signed up. Yeah.
And
I did.
Was this at the beginning of your marriage, or?
Yeah. And I'm sorry to skip over that part, but it was, that was right in the beginning. She told me along the way somewhere in a conversation that the man she was going to marry would be Catholic. So, you know, I kind of looked at it and I thought, well, I'm not going to church, right? And I love her and she's gorgeous and she means the world to me and I don't want to lose her, so I'll become Catholic, which I thought was very chivalrous in my mind. She thought it was, you know, looking back, we had some conversations where she thought I'd basically tricked her into believing that I wanted to become Catholic when all this came to light. But so yeah, I went to RCIA. My father-in-law was my sponsor. It wasn't the best RCIA class, you know. It was. Yeah.
Just sorry to interrupt, but what was it like kind of living these two lives? Because presumably you still have a relationship with your father, you have a relationship with your wife's father, you have a relationship with the people at the church and your wife, and you're living these two lives. Was there anybody who knew the kind of drug-taking, beer-pounding John Edwards at the time?
Yeah, there were some friends of mine that knew.
Yeah.
Um, but they backed away over time.
Really?
There was a couple of guys. Yeah, it started out with maybe, 8 to 10 of us that were doing this, but then it turned out to where guys, they started growing up. Like guys started
Yeah.
saying, "I can't do this anymore." Right? St.
Yeah.
Paul says, like, put away
Yeah.
childish things, and so guys started. The groups started getting smaller and smaller, and then there was a couple of us, and then those guys, found a girlfriend or something, and so it was still just me doing this. And so there were guys that knew, but they removed themselves from me, right? They were
Right.
just like, I don't want to be around that. Like this is taking over a lot of your life. And so, no one knew. Nobody at work, nobody but those few people that had pulled away, and they weren't telling anybody. So I was alone. And I got to tell you, man, it's a horrible place. Like to be the isolation, the loneliness, the being scared that you're going to be found out all the time, because
Gosh,
that's
yeah.
when you're an addict, you lie all the time. Like that was the worst part of it, is people would come up and say something to me regularly, like, "Hey John, you said," and I'd be like, "Oh God, what did I say? What did I
Huh.
say? What did I tell them? Like, what did I?" And this feeling
Yeah.
of just fear would run down your body all the time, because you're like, "I don't know what I've told. I've told so many lies. Like I'm so tangled up in this, I
Can't
don't
keep
know
up
what
with
I've
them.
told."
Yeah.
Right. So that's the true torture of addiction, man. Like it really is, that isolation and loneliness and the lying and everything you have to do, the selfishness. Like that's the thing people ask me all the time. Like what was one of the other worst parts of this? And it was the selfishness. We're all inherently selfish. If you don't believe me, get married, and you'll find out in the first couple of days how selfish you really are
Yeah.
when your life changes. But yeah,
Did you get to go to confession like when you became Catholic? And
yes, I
were
went
you
once.
were you transparent about this stuff, or was this no? That was
No,
just a
no, no,
formality,
not at
right?
all. You're
Yeah.
right. At that time, I went to confession once, and that was in RCIA when you had to, as
Yeah.
part of the program. And I went in there and just kind of, had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
Went in there and read what they told me to read and shared basically nothing, just because I was trying to check a box, right? It was all so I could marry this woman that I loved. And I don't know that I believed in any of it. And quite frankly, looking back, I think I resented becoming Catholic. I really did love my Baptist faith, and I
Mm.
was I was part of, what you hear people say all the time about what Protestants could say sometimes about Catholics. Oh, they worship Mary, they worship, and a lot of that was bred into me just from things that I heard from other people.
Yeah.
So there were things that were just so foreign to me, the kneeling, all this different stuff that goes on, communion every time. Those things were difficult to me, but I would go and I would drag myself there, just to keep Angela happy. There were a lot of Sundays I didn't want to go and where we fought because honestly I was hungover, been
Yeah.
up all night, didn't want to go. And that's when stuff started to happen in our marriage. She was just like, "You're not the person you said you were. You're not this guy I thought you were. I thought you wanted to be Catholic. I thought and that's where I had the mentality of, don't you see what I did for you? Like I gave up my faith for yours, even though I wasn't participating in my faith at all." Um, but we were, at this time, it's right when I found out about my mother. I just always thought she was going to beat this cancer.
Hmm.
And I remember the only time I ever went to the doctor with her, because once again, I was selfish and only concerned with what was going on in my life. One day I was working and I knew she was having an appointment here in Memphis. They had moved down to our farm at the time in Mississippi. And I thought I'll swing by there and see my mom and dad. Well, that was the day that I walked in there, and the doctor came in and told her that it's moved to your brain and you've only got a couple of months to live. It was the first time I'd ever been to a doctor's appointment like that with my mother. The whole time she had cancer, and it crushed me, Matt. And like I knew, like I was so mad. Like it was the only time I ever saw my father cry. My mother was a saint, man. She just took it with a grain of salt. It was like, "This is going to be okay, and we're going to spend the time together. The rest of the time we have loving each other and just spending the time we have together." But I was mad, man. Like I was pissed at God. I just thought, really, like, here's a person like me that exists. I'm a piece of garbage, right? Like I'm an addict. I lie to everybody. I'm living this double life. I'm not a good person. And you're going to take someone like her, someone who's good and pure and loves people and treats people the way that you've asked them to. But you're going to take me. And I remember in that room, like silently looking up and saying, "I will never worship you again. I will never love you. I hate you, God. I hate you for what you're taking from me." Which was a very immature stance, obviously, to have, but it's how I felt at the time. And so I made my mind up. That's it. Like, I'm done. I'm done with you. So all of a sudden, Angela and I, we've got Jacob. We buried my mother. I would just bury that, Matt. Like I didn't ever have a place where I felt comfortable sharing that. So like the only time I would ever let that out was in the shower in the morning. I'd blare music and then I'd just sit there and like punch the shower wall and just tell God how much I hated him. I'd cry for a few minutes and then tell myself that I wasn't a man because I'd cried and, and get out of the shower and then white knuckle it and through every day until 4:30 when I could get home or 5 and do a bunch of blow and forget about my life, forget about where I was. So, along this time, Angela and I started talking about having children again. And here it was again. I thought, this is going to do it, right? We're going to have another child. This has got to be it. Well, we didn't have one child. We had 2. God blessed us with twins. I can remember being at the zoo when my wife called and she's like, hey, I went to the doctor and there's 2 heartbeats. I was like, yeah, yours are the baby. She goes, no, that would be 3. And I just freaked out. I was like, I got to call you back. Do you know how much daycare is going to be? And all that. But, they came into my life and I thought, this is it, right? I got these 2 beautiful, healthy, red-haired, blue-eyed twin girls. I got Jacob, I got Angela. Like I got everything I ever wanted in my life. Good job, all this stuff. I got to stop this. But I wouldn't. I just couldn't. I kept going. It just got worse and worse, Matt. Like I was buying a 40 bag of cocaine every day, which is about that much cocaine I would do, on and off every night. I was staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning. My wife and I had gotten to the point now where we were basically just living together, right? Like she was just kind of like, I don't know what's going on, but I've got children to take care of and I can't worry with him. He's paying the bills and all those things. And I can't be a mother to another child, And so I would sit up all night. She would go to bed, I wouldn't go back there a lot because I was afraid of intimacy because, part of the byproduct of doing a lot of drugs is things don't always happen the way physically they should. So even our intimacy in that way left our marriage because of the choices and the fears that I had. So, man, I started to fall into other addictions. I started watching pornography, things like that all the time. And it was almost every night that I had a habit of, I would get home, I would cook dinner, I would do a little bit of drugs before I cooked. Then I'd sit with the family, I'd play with the kids for a while, then, put them to bed with her. Then she would go to bed, and then it would just be a free-for-all, right? Like I'd start just doing all kind of drugs and drinking a bunch of beer, smoking cigarettes, and then I would end the night.
Did she ever kind of like walk out and catch you doing all this stuff? I mean, I know men
There
think
was
that
a
they're
couple
being
times.
covert when they do all these things, but
Yeah. There was a couple of times, Matt, where she almost busted me, where she walked in and I threw like a picture frame over the line of cocaine that I had there. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'd say something like, oh, the TV's messing up and I'm just over here at the entertainment center trying to fix it. Or, there was one night where I did a line in the bathroom and I left the bag of cocaine like on the soap dish and I didn't realize it. And she found it and came out and was like, what is this? And she knew that some of us had done this in college. But I had a friend that had just left and she knew he used to do it. So I blamed it on him. I'm not very proud of that, but I blamed it on him. Like, I don't know, give me that. I'll throw it away. And of course I went and hid it and did it later.
yeah.
But, that's just where I was in my life, man. And I knew my life was out of control. But I was so focused on just trying to make money and I was really a slave to money and a lot of things like that. So anyway, there's a couple of nights, Matt, where Angela just, like I said, it just started going to bed and was just sort of like, I'm done. Like, I'm only going to deal with him when I have to. And so I'm sitting there one night and it's about 1 a.m. and I've got a customer that called or had sent a text earlier in the evening and they were upset about some things. And I just started trying to, forget about all that stuff and do a bunch of blow. And so it's about 2 a.m. I went through my whole process I normally did and I go back to bed. And somehow I fell asleep. If you've ever done cocaine, I hope nobody watching this has, but it's hard to go to sleep. This night, for whatever it wasn't. And I passed out. Well, about 30 minutes later, I woke up and it felt like my heart was going to explode out of my chest. Like I've never felt anything like that in my life. It felt like somebody was stabbing me in my heart. And I sort of rolled out of the bed and landed on my knees. And at the time we lived in a very small house. So our master bathroom was like what most people would have as a regular closet. And it was right there. So I was trying to not make noise as I crawled to the bathroom. Pulled the commode lid down and sat there and just began to freak out and rock back and forth and go, oh God, this is it. Like I'm going to die. This is it. Like I knew this was going to happen one day. And what an idiot I've been to do this. I'm going to leave my kids and my wife without a husband and a father. And I just began to think I need to tell Angela, I need to say, Angela, please call an ambulance. Please call an ambulance. But Matt, like in that moment, the fear took over where I was like, I don't want her to find out. Like I would rather die right here on this toilet than I would for her to find out and have to deal with explaining my life for the last, 10 years of my life. I was 37 years old at this time, when this happened. So this had been 10 years of my marriage. So I sat there and I grabbed a towel and I just threw it over my face. I remembered some stupid thing I learned on TV, like about how to, slow your breathing if you're hyperventilating when you're a kid. So I've got my face shoved in a towel and I'm kind of halfway praying to God going, if you help me with this, I'll stop, I'll stop. I promise you I'll be good. I won't do this anymore. Just help me get through this. And so I slowed my breathing. I crawled back over to the bed, slipped under the covers, and somehow went to sleep. It was perfectly fine. I woke up the next morning. I threw out the drugs, poured out the beer, all that stuff, and said, I'm done. Well, 4:30 the next afternoon, I was back at the dealer buying at the store buying more beer, and did the exact same thing the next night. The same thing happened. Laying there in bed, fell asleep, my heart feeling like it's going to explode again. I go in the bathroom, I sit down on the commode there again, slow my breathing, and I just said, this is it. Like, I'm going to die. I don't know that I'm going to get a third strike. Like, I've got to stop this in my life. Well, here in Memphis, we have a group of men called the Fishers of Men. I think you were actually supposed to speak here back in April before COVID threw a monkey wrench and all that. But this thing, my father-in-law, he's a devout Catholic, an uber Catholic kind of guy, and he had been asking me to go to this men's conference for years, and I just say, no, I'm not going to do that. Get out of here. I don't want to go do that. And that's all I could think about. It was coming up that weekend, and I was like, I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go to confession, and I'm going to do it right this time. Like, for no other reason, I'm going to go just for confession. And so I did. God helped me slow my breathing again. I got back in bed, woke up the next day, threw out the drugs, and then I made it to the weekend and went to this day on Saturday, which was, you had a couple of speakers. I think, it was Crossing the Goal guys or something like that, Danny Abranowitz and some of them, and a witness speaker. But I went for confession, and that's exactly what I did. When it came time for confession, I got up. I was there by myself. My father-in-law was there, but he was working, doing other things. And I go down this hallway, and I begin to look at priest doors, right? Like, nope, know him. Nope, I know him. Nope, I know him. Nope, I don't want to wreck that guy's image of me, right? So
yeah.
I go down the hall, and I find this guy from Batesville, Mississippi, which is a small town about an hour away. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to know that guy. So I go in there, and I sit down. It's this crotchety kind of old priest. He looked like he didn't want to be there. He just looked angry.
Oh, man.
And I sit down, and I'm like, we start, and I start to tell him all this stuff. And I spill my guts, Matt. Like, you thought you were crying that night. You were listening to me. I was bawling. There was snot coming out. Like, I was just, just letting it all loose. And I told him everything. I remember at the end, I said, I want help, but I don't want to get in trouble. Like, I want to be better, but I don't want to get in trouble. And man, he lit into me, Matt. He was just like, it's not up to you. If you want forgiveness, then you have to be repentant. You have to have a truly repentant heart. He's screaming at me. I'm like, all right, man. All right. Like, I just, I didn't know you were supposed to get yelled at in here, that kind of stuff. And he's just berating me, but that's what I needed in my life right at that time. He's like, you need to own up to your mistakes and go be the man that God calls you to be. Go be the man your family needs to be. So I promised I would. I made that promise to God. I got up out of the room. I went home that night. I threw everything out. Like, anything I had left, I went through the house, poured out the beer, threw the drugs out. My wife must have thought, like, what the heck's going on? And I did well for 4 days. I went to work for those 4 days, and even though I felt sick inside at night, like, that's when I realized how addicted I was, Matt, is when I was coming home from work, everything in my body wanted me to pull off at the exit to go where my dealer's house was. Wow. I felt like physically ill because I just was used to it. Like, I've heard people say that before that are drug addicts, that say, your normal is my sick, right? How you feel right now is my sick.
Oh, wow. Anything else happen on that weekend? By the way, it just really is, it sobers me up to the reality of what I do, and I'm sure you agree with what you do when you travel around and speak. It is
Sure.
tempting to fall into the trap of being like, I've got this thing, I gotta get a speaking gig. It's like, no, this is not a speaking gig. This is proclaiming the gospel of Jesus Christ so that prisoners may be set free. Hey, and how powerful that! It's amazing that I could have been there and given you that talk, although that may have kind of hindered your conversions. Who knows? But what else happened during that weekend?
Nothing much. I mean, that was a Saturday, and I went home and that Saturday night, like I said, threw everything out. And then I told my wife I want to go to church Sunday morning, which I did with her. And she was kind of looking at me like, okay, what's really going on now, right? I haven't had to fight. He's up and ready and helping the kids. So I just did that, and then I started to go about my work week, And like I said, those feelings were horrible, man. It's the worst I've ever felt in my life. Like, take the worst stomach virus you ever had, and like that's how my body felt like from the time. And it happened like, Matt, it's so crazy looking back at it. It happened like at the time I would normally be going to get drugs. So I was fine all day long working. Really? But when it came time for my body was used to like, okay, now it's time to party, that's when this sickness would come over me. And, I began to get grumpy and ill and irritated. And so I had to watch how I was with my family. But those 4 days happened. And I told myself, like, I'm proud of myself. I'm doing this. It's going to take a lot. But because I was doing this on my own, Matt, like nobody knew about this. But now this priest and myself. So it wasn't like I had a support group or anything. So for those 4 days, I just am trying to white knuckle it through it. Well, that coming Thursday, I went to sell something down in one of my customers in Mississippi. The sale I've been working on forever. It was going to be like a $300,000 sale, and I was going to make a ton of money off of it. And the guy told me that day, he said, "I send it, bill it, get it here." And so this euphoria came over me. I'm like, I just made more money on one sale than I made all of this year.
Golly.
And so I just start taking off up the interstate back towards Memphis to go home. And I think, you know what? I should just celebrate, right? Like I should just run by my dealer's house just for a minute, because those calls hadn't stopped, right? That guy was still pinging me all the time, and
wow.
Just dangling it in front of your, hey, I'll give you this for this, or I'll give you more for this. And so I was having to fight all that the whole time too. But so I'm driving. I'm supposed to be going to pick up my son Jacob from my father-in-law's, and I pass by the exit with this dealer, and I start calling him. Right? He doesn't answer. He doesn't answer. I get halfway to my father-in-law's, and then he calls back. And I rip off the interstate, and I turn around and I head back to his house, which was 20 minutes back the other way out of my way. I pull in, I go get my, I give him the $40. I get my usual stuff. I get in the car. I look down, and on my speedometer, it says 0. Like I'm almost out of gas. Like digitally, it said no gas, 0. And I'm not in a nice part of town. So I hit the gas, and I'm running down the street because there's a gas station down on the corner. Well, I whip in there, and I stop, and I go, oh, thank God I didn't run out of gas. Like I'm good. All of a sudden, I heard this whoop, whoop, and I turned around, and it was a police siren. The DEA was behind me. They were watching his house. They were watching the guy's house. They'd had complaints. The guy lived down the street from a church, and I guess people had seen people coming and going and called, and the police were watching the house. So next thing you know, I'm jerked out of the car. I'm thrown up against my own car. They're yelling, "Where's the drugs?" And if you don't tell us, we're going to tear the car apart, all this kind of stuff. And I shoved them in my sock. And I'm a guy who'd never been in trouble in my life, right? Never been in trouble with the cops, anything like that, other than speeding tickets or something like that. And I tell them. So they find it, they grab it, they throw me in the back of a Tahoe. And next thing you know, I'm speeding downtown to an organized crime unit, and they're driving my car to an impound lot. And I'm sitting there handcuffed and sliding around the back of this Tahoe and just realizing this is it. Like my life's over. Like Angela's going to find out. The kids are going to know. My family's going to find out. My job. I'm going to lose everything. And so all I was doing was trying to concentrate on, I'm going to get out of this, right? I get out of everything. I talk my way out of everything. I never get in a situation I can't get out of. And so they take me down to this organized crime unit. They throw me in this room where this police commander is. And they're all guys dressed up like they're going to a club because they're undercover agents. So they've got me chained to this bench, and handcuffed to it too. He starts shaking me down, and he tells me if I help him that, they'll let me go, which was not the truth. He was a big fat liar. That didn't work out that way. He told me, he just said, look, you're going to jail. You're not getting out of this, right? Like, no way. Yeah. You bought cocaine, you've been caught with it, and you're going to jail. I don't care. I said, well, what about my wife and my kids? I'm sorry. And he looked at me. He's like, you should have thought about that, whenever you started doing this. So this cop comes and gets me, and they take me to another patrol car, and I'm getting taken down to the holding center downtown in Memphis, which is statistically speaking one of the most dangerous cities in the country as far as for crime. So I'm sitting there in this long line of police cars waiting to drop people off. And the two young police officers that were driving were not happy about having to be there. They were going to be another 2 hours before they got off. But one of them looked at me, and I'll never forget, Matt. He said, "Man, what's your deal?" He goes, "You don't look like somebody that would be in trouble, and I know what your charges are, but what's the deal with you?" And I said, "Man, I made a mistake. I've gotten addicted to something. I should have never done it. All I'm worried about right now is talking to my wife and my kids. Is letting my wife know where I am." So the police officer says, "Look, if you want to tell her where you are, I'll get your phone out of the trunk and I'll put it to your ear, and I'll let you call her. You can't dial it. I can't uncuff you, but you can talk to her." And I remember saying, "Well, I don't know. I'm afraid of what she's going to say." And he looked at me and he said, "Is this about you or about her?" And Matt, I realized right then in my life how much of my life had been about me, right? Like just about what I wanted, when I wanted. It was my money, all the drugs I was doing, everything in my life had been about me. So he gets the phone, he puts it to my ear, and I call her and I say, "Angela, this has been 3 hours now, right? It's 7:00 at night. Last anybody heard from me was about 4 p.m. And so she's all the questions you would expect, right? Where are you? Are you okay? What's happened? And I just told her, "Angela, I'm in the back of a police car. I've been arrested for the possession of cocaine." And the phone got silent, and she went silent on the phone. And then she said, I hate you. I hate you. I hope you rot in there." And Matt, I wasn't, I didn't blame her. I mean, this was I knew what I had done in my life, and I knew I deserved every bit of what she just said. I also knew that she was hurt, and she would need time if she was ever even going to have the possibility of reconciling with me. But at that time, man, I looked over and I had this fear of this place I'm going into. So I kind of just said, at least I know she knows where I am. Like, she knows I'm not dead. So at least I could take solace in that. So they take me inside, and they pull your belt and all that stuff off, and I go in this kind of chute that takes you in this larger room, and you're surrounded by just thousands of people that are in there for DUIs or whatever. I mean, guys are hitting each other, beating each other up. Bailiffs are throwing guys in holding cells that are fighting. And I'm sitting there still thinking I'm going to get out of this. Well, next thing you know, it's 4 a.m. I hadn't eaten in 24 hours, something like that. I hadn't changed clothes. I was just sitting there scared to death. They take me over for a mug shot. I get one of those things like you see on Law and Order or whatever. And I'm still thinking I'm going to get out of this, right? Just convincing myself I'm going to get out of this. Well, eventually they call me back and they tell me, to go over to this desk, and they give me this sack, which has got scrubs and, all these things in it. And they say, you need to go in there and change. And that's when it hit me. Like, I'm not getting out of this. Like, I'm in jail. I'm not getting out. My life is going to be over. But like I said, it was 4 a.m. and I had no idea, what to do. I was just exhausted. So I changed. They gave me some size 16 Crocs, which I can't even find size 16 shoes at the store, but they have them in jail. It's kind of messed up, but hey, if you got big feet, go to jail. They got shoes for you. But so I'm sitting there and I get in this line, and that's, we start walking down this cell block, and next thing you know, they tell me to stop in front of a cell. I'm looking at it, these wrought iron doors, and these 2 bunk beds, these nasty beds, like God knows what's on there. And they open the door and say, inmate, step in, turn around, look at us. And so I do. And the door shuts, Matt. And that's like, if you want the imagery, I mean, this metal, just huge door, just slowly chug into a close, and then the boom of a lock. And I was like, that's it. My life's over. Like, I don't know what my life's going to be after this. So I turned around. I thought, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm exhausted. I took one of the blankets. I threw it on the bottom bunk. And I took the other one. I pulled it over me and just laid down there and passed out by the grace of God. When I woke up the next morning, I was still under that blanket, so it was dark. And I thought, oh, great, that was a nightmare. Like, thank you, God. Like, thank you so much. I will stop this in my life. Like, thank you for giving me another chance. And I sat up, and my head hit the bottom of a steel bunk bed. And, I threw the cover off of me. I threw my legs over the side of the bed, and there was a cinder block wall, 5 feet in front of me maybe, and then a stainless steel toilet. And I look over, and there's a guy across the way just staring at me. And I was like, no, 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 no. This isn't real. This isn't happening. I thought I dreamed this. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I start just rubbing my arms and rocking back and forth. And that feeling I had in that bathroom came back, like my heart was going to blow out of my chest. And I just kept saying, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm going to lose my wife, my kids, my family. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to lose everything. And then all of a sudden, Matt, like, this is the craziest thing. I stopped rocking. Like, I came to a stop. And my hands fell to my waist or to my legs. And this peace came over me, this undescribable peace. And all of a sudden I heard these words come out of my own mouth. The truest words I've ever said in my life, man. I said, at least now I don't have to lie anymore. At least now everyone will know who I am. Because that was the thing I was the most afraid of, right? Was everybody finding out that I wasn't this person I had presented to them, that I wasn't this decent husband or a good employee or whatever. I was this drug addicted, lost, broken, torn up man. And so I sat there and those words came out. And it was like the cinder blocks and chains and weights just fell off of my shoulders. And I began to think, okay, well, what can I do, right? I can't control if I'm going to lose my wife or my kids or any of that other stuff. But what I can do is have a conversation with God, which is something I hadn't had in a long time. And I remember sitting there and looking back over everything that had happened. And it was almost like Christ had his arm around me, Matt. Like I began to cry and go, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I told you I hate you. I'm so sorry for the way I've acted. I'm sorry for the father I've been to my children. I'm sorry for the husband I've been to my wife. God, I don't deserve to live. And if you want me to, I'm okay with dying right now, and that's the place where I was. But I can remember him it was like his arm was around me and he's like, no, like all those things you're talking about, those things you said to me, that's who you needed me to be at the time, right? That's who you needed me to be for you. Even though you weren't going to church, all these things, like you needed me to be that in your life. But now, John, I need you to be something else for me. And so I began to to just pray and think about what am I going to do? Like, I can't just get out of here and stop doing drugs. I can't just stop drinking like a madman. I can't just, like, I have to change my life or I'm going to be no better than I was. I'm still going to be a selfish, irritable jerk, right? So God and I spent some time in that jail cell praying back and forth. And later that afternoon, the bailiff, the door opens all of a sudden. And I'm thinking, what's going on, right? And the bailiff comes over and just says, you can walk around, you can take a shower, you can, have a phone call. And Matt, I don't know if you've seen any prison movies, but I decided not to take the shower route immediately just because of things that may or may not happen in there. So I was just like, I'm going to go take the phone call, right? Option. So I came over to the phone call. And there's this device there that has no headset or anything. I have no idea how to use it. No one is like telling you how. I'm asking the bailiff. They're like, you got to make a call. You only have a short amount of time. And I'm like, no, how do you work this thing? It's basically a box with numbers and that's it. Like no way to hear anything. So all of a sudden there's this cell right there, which I was worried about too, because my back was to it. And this hand comes out with this toilet paper roll, empty toilet paper roll. And I'm looking like, oh my gosh, because I didn't know what it was at first. And I turned around and looked and the guy said, here, put this to your ear and put it to the phone and you'll be able to hear, and I wish I knew who that guy was so I could track him down because I was so scared I wasn't going to get out of jail. And he allowed me to be able to put that to that phone and be able to contact people. But man, I started to call everybody in my life, all those fraternity brothers, all those guys I'd spent that money on, all those guys at Brothers for Life, man, we're going to be together forever. And no one answered the phone. It was the loneliest I've ever felt in my life. No one getting all those answer machines and people knew I was in jail. They just didn't have the time for me then. They didn't want anything to do with it. So I finally get a hold of my sister at my dad's and she says, John, we know what's happened. Angela's across the street trying to get you bailed out. She is not going to let you come home. But Dad or I, if you get out tonight, one of us will be down there to pick you up. So at least I could take a little solace in that, right? I'm getting out of here and, being a 6'8" guy in a 6x6 cell gets a little claustrophobic after a while. So I left the phone. I went back. I started to pray a little bit more. And a couple of minutes later, the bailiff came back and said, hey, John, you have a visitor here. So I go in there and it's my wife and my mother-in-law. And it's completely one of those scenes you see in the movie, the glass, the pay phones, the people sitting there talking to their visitors. And I sit down and my wife's just looking at me and she's crying. My mother-in-law's crying. And she looked at me and she said, John, I'm not happy with you at all right now. I'm so hurt. I hate you right now, but I need you to know that I'm not going to divorce you. She goes, and it has nothing to do with who you are. It has everything to do with the vows I made to Christ, the vows I made in the church with you. And she said what she could say, and she got up, and my mother-in-law just said, John, we're going to get you some help. Just stay safe in there, and we're going to try to get you some help. So they left. I go back to the cell. It's about 9 o'clock at night. And they come get me and they say, you've made bail. Come get your stuff, change back into your clothes. Here's your phone, all of that. I get my phone. I see my work's called like a million times. And I go outside the jail expecting to see my sister, but it's not my sister. It's my father. And man, like, I don't know if you could, just the feeling of I was a little boy again, right? Like you break something in the house and you got to go, answer to that mistake or that issue to your father. Like all that came rushing back, and here I was, this 6'8", 37-year-old man, and I was a little boy again in front of my father and afraid of what was going to happen. Now this was on Good Friday. I forgot to mention that, but I was arrested on Holy Thursday and I come out of jail on Good Friday. My dad is standing there and he looks at me and I kind of got my head down and I'm just waiting for the scolding or the, what the hell, where did this come from kind of stuff. And he just looks at me and says, John, pick up your head. And I looked at him and he said, son, I love you. Are you okay? And I didn't hear I love you very often from my father growing up. Recently, he has been very gracious with that moving forward, but it was something I always died to hear, when I was a kid. I would have killed for a lot. And so when I heard that, it melted me, right? Like he just put his arm around me. He said, get in the car. We're going to go home. We're going to go to your house. We're going to get some clothes. And then you're going to go down to the farm with me, which is about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive. And Matt, it was probably the realest conversation I ever had with my dad. We talked about my mother and the loss of my mother. And I remember him looking over at me and saying, son, did I cause any of this? Was there something I've done that made you do this in your life? Was I not a good father? He asked me all these questions and man, it was like getting hit with a ton of bricks, man. Like just, no, Dad, you were a good dad. Like we all have certain issues or faults, right? Like I have them. We all have them, but you were a good dad. You cared. You worked your butt off. You provided for us. You didn't do anything. I'm a grown man. I made my own decisions, right? This is not your fault. So we go down there. We have this wonderful car ride, just really the closest moment I think I've ever felt to my dad in my life. And we get down to the farm the next day, Saturday. My sister's there. I've got some relatives that are showing up and kind of curious as to why my family's not around on Easter weekend. And I was having to lie, which I didn't want to do, but I also didn't want to. Some of my aunts were older, and I just didn't want to put that strain on them. And so anyway, the next day, Sunday, and all I could think about all weekend is my wife. Like, she comes from this huge Italian family, just wonderful, devout Catholics. And I knew they were all going to go to church, and then they were going to go to her aunt's house, and there was going to be, 50, 60 people and kids, and she was going to have to walk into this house, and they all commune in the kitchen, right? So I knew she was going to be coming in through the garage, and there'd be the noise of all these people talking, and then that, when she came in, and it was just killing me to put her in that position. But that Sunday morning, I woke up and I said, I want to go to Mass. Like, for the first time in my life that I can remember, I want to go to Mass. I have this desire to go to Mass. And in this town of Bruce, Mississippi, there's like 600 people total. And there's a Catholic room. Like, there's not a building, it's a room. And I had been there once before, a couple of years ahead of time. And my wife and I had gone for Christmas there when she drugged me there one Christmas Eve. And so I knew where it was. And I go over there at 11. I'm hoping there's a Mass. Pull up, nobody's there. I began to beat the steering wheel and cry, just angry. Like, God, really? The first time, like, I've wanted to go to Mass, and it's not even open. Like, it's Easter Sunday. I can't even go to Mass. And all of a sudden, this Jeep pulls in the parking lot, and it was a nun, a sister, that would help do communion services there whenever the traveling priest that had to travel between these small towns couldn't make it. So she pulls up, and she sees me beating the steering wheel and, yelling, and she knocks on the window, and she's like, what are you doing? I said, I just want to go to Mass. She probably thought, what's wrong with this guy? But she said, look, young man, there's too many people. It's Easter. We're down the road in the 4-H club building down in the next town, like this big agricultural building. And she said, do you know where it is? I said, yeah. And I, got back in my dad's car and drove down the street and went in there. And this priest gives this beautiful homily, English and Spanish. There was just a mixed crowd there, tons of families. It was just killing me to be in there without mine. But this gospel message, the homily he gave was just amazing. It was the same priest that had done that Christmas Mass years before. So I get up from that Mass and I'm thinking, all right, like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go home and I'm going to do everything in my power to win my family back, to keep. I don't even care if I lose my job, right? Like, I'll find a job. I just want my family and want a chance to be the father and the husband I never was. So I go to the door and I'm about to leave, and all of a sudden this hand hits my shoulder, and I'm freaking out because I'm like, I don't know anybody in here. Like, who's grabbing me? And I turn around and it's this priest. And he looks at me and he says, hello, John. He remembered my name from 4 years ago, meeting me one time. And he said, I don't know where your family is or why they're not here, but God wants me to tell you that everything's going to be all right. And I don't know, Matt. Like, he turned and he walked off. And I just took that as a signal, like, all right, God wants me to do this. My family and I are going to be reunited. I'm going to be a different person. So I got in the car, went back to my dad's, went home that night. Got a suit, went back to my dad's, and then the next Monday morning, I had a court date. So I had to go to court. I had to go to my work to talk to my bosses. They'd found out, and they wanted to know what was going on and all of that, and what was true and what wasn't. So I go to court. I plead guilty. I get put on diversion. There's a drug court here in Memphis that allows people, if you have the means, to be able to go through treatment stuff without having to actually, go to jail or anything like that for extended time. You can go in and take drug tests and all those things and help stop doing this in your life. So I chose that, and I had to go every month to see a parole officer and all that. But I left there. I went to my work. I sat down with them, and I answered every question: yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. I really wasn't concerned whether I lost my job. I'd been there 23 years. I'd never been in trouble. That was up to them. All I wanted to do is I'd made my mind up that I was going to check myself into a behavioral science center because I wanted to know how deep this went. I wanted to know what kind of battle I was going to face and what I needed to do in my life. So my dad drove me to all those places, and then I leave that room with my bosses and said, Dad, take me down to this behavioral science center, and I just want you to drop me off there. And he said, no, I'm going to come in with you. Well, Matt, we go in, and I've never been in a place like this. And people were just bringing their family members in, like, one after the other, and just like, take them. I'm done. Like, guys, scratching their skin off on their arms because they thought they had bugs or something crawling on them because they were methed out or they were on heroin or something else. And, I told my dad, I was like, just please wait in the car. I don't want you to see this. I don't want you to see this. So they take me back to a second waiting room, and I'm sitting there, and this door is right over my right shoulder where you come in and out. And one after another, it continues, just families bringing these people in. And I look over, there's a newspaper. I pick it up just to block my view. And the door continues to open. And next thing you know, the door opens and nobody walks by. The paper doesn't billow or anything like that. And I look up and it's my wife. Now, I haven't talked to her since that night in jail, that Friday. And she looks down at me and I said, Angela, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And she said, John, I'm mad as hell and I'm so hurt, but I can't let you go through this alone. And so I put the paper down and she sat down and she held my hand and we waited until we got called back to go into the assessment center. We go in there and this lady just says, I think he needs 30 days outpatient. And my wife said, okay. And so I'm leaving and I said, look, I'll just come by the house, Angela, get clothes. I'll go back to my dad's. And she said, John, there's no sense in your dad driving an hour and a half up here twice during a day for the next 30 days to take you to this. The kids are wondering where you are. Allison, my 3-year-old daughter, was asking if I was dead because they hadn't seen me in 4 days. And so she says, you can come home. So I go home that night, and man, I got to tell you, like, I opened that back door to my house, and we had a den there in the back where we just kind of hung out and watched movies and played and all that stuff. And they were sitting there, and that was the happiest I've ever been in my life. Like, I opened that door, and I hit my knees, and the kids just grabbed me, and I just thought, like, I will never do what I've done to you again. Like, I will never squander the time I have with you. I will be present to you. I will be the father you deserve, the father you should always have. Right. And I said the same thing to my wife. I was like, I know you're angry. I know I've hurt you. And I know you're not going to believe a lot of things I say. And I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to give me a chance. I didn't even know what that meant, Matt. Like, we go through the evening. Angela told me, she said, I'm going to sleep in Jacob's bed. I just want to be in there with him. I can't sleep in the bed with you right now. The way my old house was laid out, my bedroom was right across from his, and my side of the bed I could see his bed through the doorway. And so it's time to go to bed. We put the kids down. She goes to bed in there with Jacob, and I lay down on the bed, and I'm sort of going, man, this is nice. Like, I'm in my bed. I'm in my house. Like, I can eat something besides cornbread and, like, whatever that was they served me in jail. There's air conditioning, TV. And I started to get comfortable, right? And I looked over, and I saw this empty space in the bed where my wife should have been, if it hadn't been for my faults. And I look over and I see her, I don't want to say lump. She doesn't like when I say lump. So I see her figure under the covers across the hallway. And I just thought, I can't just not do drugs anymore. I got to be somebody different. I got to do something different. And I felt this urge come over me, Matt, like right then to do something. So I start looking around the room for a Bible or anything. And I should have looked at my wife's bedside table. I don't know why I didn't think there. She would have probably had 10 of them in there. But I opened my drawer and I find Father Larry Richards' Be a Man book that I'd gotten years before from my father-in-law. I open it up and I read it cover to cover that night. Wow. And my wife got up at like 5 a.m. and she's like, what are you doing up so early reading? And I said, Angela, I never went to sleep. I'm just trying to figure out how to be this man that you deserve. And so I started to read again, Matt, and pray again. A year goes by where I'm starting to just do this on my own. Like, my wife was obviously hurt, and she was waiting for the other shoe to drop all the time. Like, this is just a hoax. Like, he's reading the Bible. This is going to stop. When's he going to start drinking again? When's he going to disappear? When's he going to? And I used to get angry about that, but I had to realize I'm the one that put her in that situation. Like, that's the person I have become to her. I can't be angry at her for just subscribing to the person that I have shown her to be, that I've shown myself to be. So I just said, I've got to put my head down and I got to worry about the one opinion that's going to matter at the end of time, which is God's, right? Of what he thinks of me and who he wants me to be. So I started reading the Bible. I started going to daily mass. I was hiding one day. I took the kids to school. I wasn't back on my job yet. And the world was kind of caving in on me. All my customers had found out about everything that's going on. It's getting texts like, you cokehead, you piece of this, F you, don't ever come back here, that kind of stuff. And I was watching everything I built for 23 years crumble in front of me. And I just thought, how am I going to face the world? Like, I'm going to have to go back to work in 30 days. They allowed me to stay, but I couldn't tell anybody what had happened. It was an agreement I signed. So all these people were berating me and I couldn't answer them. I'm sitting there trying to hide. I just want to hide from the world. And I see the pastor of my church go across the parking lot. And I knew where he was going. I knew he was going to 8:15 Mass. So I went in there and said, you know what? Nobody will look for me in there, right? I can hide in there. And so I go in there and I open the door, and just the guilt of everything I'd been and done was coming over me. I go in there, there's about 10 older people, probably in their 70s or 80s, and that's it. And here comes this 6'8", 37-year-old guy. Everybody's like looking at, going, who's he and why is he here? I go in and I sit down, and Mass starts, and 2 minutes into it, I'm bawling. I'm just bawling. I'd always ignored Mass because I didn't want to be there, right? I just felt like I was being dragged there. It wasn't my faith, all of that. So I ignored it. I was thinking about what my football team played or what we needed to get from the grocery later or whatever. But this day, on a day where there was no kids in there was not a lot of people, I heard every word of the Mass. You could hear a pin drop in there. And so this priest gets up and he reads the readings and they speak directly to me. He gives a homily and it speaks directly to me. And I'm bawling, Matt, like ugly crying. Like I'm surprised somebody didn't come over and say, you need to go like into the cry room as an adult or whatever. You're making too much noise. So I'm kneeling there and I'm just crying. I'm crying. And it comes time to receive communion, right? He's consecrated everything and I'm just sobbing. And he's looking at me and I'm on the front right on the Joseph side. And he's waving me to come up. And I'm like, no, and he just keeps waving me. And I just keep saying no. And he just looks at me and says, come. And so I got up there. I took communion. And I went back to I went over to the blood. I received the blood. And I went and I knelt. And I just prayed, Matt. Like I prayed. Like Mass was over. They processed out. And I was praying so hard that I didn't even know Mass had ended. I never got up again or anything. And so a few minutes later, I feel another hand on my chest, on my shoulder. And I look up and it's this priest, Father James Martell, who's now one of my best friends in the world. And he looks at me, he says, John, what are you doing here? Which was a valid question. I wasn't a guy you would expect to see in daily Mass, but he sees my tears and he looks up and he says, come with me. And I notice we're tracking towards the confessional and I start to get worried. I'm like, man, last time I went in there, like I got arrested and all this stuff. I don't know that I want to go back in there. But he took me in there and I told him everything, and he just started saying, look, stop beating yourself up. Stop beating yourself up. We're not going to think about that anymore. That's who you used to be. And he starts coaching me through all that stuff, right? And telling me every time I tried to beat myself up, he said, no, we're not doing that. We're moving forward. And so I get up, he gives me absolution. I get up to leave and he grabs me by the arm. He goes, where do you think you're going? So what do you mean? Isn't this the part where I leave? I hadn't done this much, but I'm pretty sure this is when I exit stage left. And he says, no, like sit down. I want to talk to you. Says, look, you said that you're off work for 30 days and that all you have to do is go to this behavioral center and that doesn't start until 10 in the morning. So that tells me you got a couple hours. You're dropping the kids off here at 8 in the morning anyway. So I'm going to need you to start going to 8:15 Mass every day. So I'm going to expect to see you here at 8:15 every day. And by the way, you know how I read the readings this morning? Because there was no one here to help me? I said, yeah. And he goes, you're going to lecture. You're going to start tomorrow. I'm going to teach you how to do it right after we walk out of this confessional. And he said, and the last thing, you're going to come to confession with me once a week until we decide that the frequency doesn't need to be the same. And Matt, like, he took me under his wing. He began to care for me. He told me that I could be something better than I had been. And so that compared with just the things I was doing on my own reading, I found my love of Scripture again. As a Protestant, I was always in the Bible. I love the Bible. And a year later, it rolls around and the same conference comes around, this men's conference. And I go back, and this time was the first time in my life I've been to one of these where I'm like, other than when I was younger, where I'm looking forward to it, like I'm going to receive. And I go there. Father Mike Schmitz talked. I'm sure it was great. I don't remember all of it, but there was a witness speaker that had been arrested for cocaine and alcohol abuse and DUIs and stuff. It's a Focus student. He shares this, and I was like, what incredible strength. Like, I have not had the guts to tell anybody in my life. I didn't tell anyone. But this kid got up there and shared this with 1,000 men. So I found him afterwards, and I just shared with him how much it meant to me. I shared with him what had happened in my life. And then later that night, I was at my parish at a fundraising event, and another guy from my parish had been to that same conference. And apparently he hadn't been to confession in 23 years or something, or 17 years, something like that. He went to confession, and he was so caught up in the Spirit that night that he was telling everybody in the gym, he's like, I went to confession, and woo, and he's screaming. And some of the things I had to stop him. I'm like, dude, the whole thing in the shower, all that stuff, like, you need to stop talking. There's women and children present, man, so he calmed down, but he said, can you take me, like, why do I feel this way? Can you tell me that? And I said, man, you're just caught up in the Spirit. Well, he started saying, what does that mean? I don't know about the Holy Spirit. I know about God. I know about Jesus, but I don't know anything about the Holy Spirit. I'm a cradle Catholic. No, the first thing about the Spirit. And I just told him, no, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to help you with that. Like, go see the priest. I'm not your guy, right? All that I had done was flooding back over me. I was like, I have no business telling anybody how to be a Christian. And so I sat there and just kept telling him no, but he was persistent. He said, look, let me take you to dinner Tuesday night. So I finally gave in so he'd leave me alone, honestly, because he was swearing me out. And I went and I met him Tuesday at this pizza place. In the time between the two, I was sitting there Sunday going, what am I going to do? What am I going to tell this guy? Like, he thinks I'm some kind of guru on the Holy Spirit. And what am I going to do? So I started opening Father Larry's book. I started opening the Bible. Next thing you know, I've got like legal pads full of information on the Holy Spirit all this started coming back to me, that all this, knowledge and the teaching I'd received as a young man in the Baptist church. And so I go over and we have this dinner, and I start sharing with them all of this from the beginning, the Ruah over the earth, the wind of the breath over the earth, all the way to Pentecost and beyond. And he just goes, wow, like, why aren't you leading a Bible study? Why aren't you doing something in the parish? Why aren't you leading men? Why aren't you? And I just said, I can't, Jay, I just can't. I can't. And he kept asking. And I said, Jay, I can't. Like, please stop. I can't do what you're asking me to do. And he finally just looked at me and said, why? Like, you could help so many people. And it was in that moment that I felt the Spirit tell me just to share my story. So I shared it with him, just what I've shared with you now. And I expected him to like knock all the stuff off the table and be like, you jerk, like you're a piece of this. But he just looked at me and he said, that's amazing. You should start a men's group. And I was flabbergasted. Like, did you not just hear what I said? Like, I used to do tons of cocaine, was addicted to porn. Like, I don't think that's on the resume of leading men, or the job requirement. So he said, no, we'll do it together. So we called about 20, 30 guys together we both knew from our parish. A week later on a Wednesday night, I had no idea what I was going to do. I just knew that I had to share with them what I shared with you and with him that night. So I'm walking up. I parked the car, and it's the time of year where it's dark outside. I'm walking up to the family room, and there's all these guys in there. There's like 35 dudes in there. They can see me. I can't see them. And I'm walking up to the door, and I start to grab the door, and I swear on my life, it was just probably not a good thing to do. But I promise you, I heard this voice that was like, don't open that door. If you open that door, you're going to lose everything. They're going to find out about your drug problem, about your porn problem, about all this stuff. You're going to lose everything. You're going to embarrass your wife. I bet you they'll kick your kids out of the school, that your kids won't be able to go to school here anymore. You won't be allowed to go to this parish. And so I let go of the door, and I turned around, and I started to walk away. And just this silent whisper, like it reminds me of the Old Testament, right, where God was in the whisper. He wasn't in the earthquake or any of that. And I heard this voice just say, John, you promised me when you walked out of that cell that you would do what I needed you to do. So I turned around and I opened that door. Walked in there, and a bunch of men were sitting there going, John, what are we doing here? Like, nobody's told us why we're here. Like, what's going on? And so I stood up and I said, look, guys, we have a great men's group here at the parish. We do a lot of stuff. We cook food and make money for kids' jerseys and all that. But we never talk about God. The only time we ever mention God is when we pray before we eat, and that's only if the priest is there. And let me tell you how wrong your life can be if that's the extent of what your relationship with Christ is. And so I just went, blah. And I told them all exactly what I told you. Stood up, I was crying and all that, just scared to death. And at the end of it, I just said, look, I know you didn't know why you were here. I don't know why I'm here, quite frankly, other than God has seemed to have brought me here. But I think we need to start something spiritual for men here in our parish. And if you want to stay and be a part of that, that's fine. But if you want to leave, I understand, like, you didn't know why you were here. And I don't want there to be hard feelings, so you can go if you'd like to. And I sat down and I just buried my head in my chest and thought, what did I just do, right? And all of a sudden, a guy stood up next to me and he just said, I looked up, I thought he was leaving. And he said, I'm a bad dad. I'm a terrible father. I care more about money and my job than I do my family. And he sat down. And another guy stood up and he said, I'm an alcoholic. He said, I've been in a hotel room drinking all day. I Ubered here. My wife and I fight. I escaped a hotel room. My work thinks I'm at home sick. My wife thinks I'm at work. And the next guy stood up and he said, I smoke pot and my wife's going to leave me over it if I don't stop. The next guy, I'm getting divorced. The next guy, I'm addicted to porn. All the way around the room. It looked like pistons in an engine of men getting up and sitting down, just sharing what had gone on in their life. And these guys' eyes, Matt, they were just like, you could say this kind of stuff? Like, this is, you're allowed to share. You're allowed to be vulnerable. And Matt, that's when God showed me the power of vulnerability in my life. Like, I started to think about, and Ansel was very, she was very worried about this and wasn't really 100% on board with me doing this in the very beginning. But it's when I realized, like, our story and our pain wasn't just for pain, right? Like, it didn't happen just for us to hurt and to suffer. God wanted us to use it to help other people. And that room full of men that night, it showed me the power of vulnerability. Like St. Paul says, like, when I am weak, I'm strong. The world tells us, you got to be a man and don't show any emotions and don't share your life with anybody else. And, it's less manly to be vulnerable or something like that. But the Lord tells St. Paul, no, my power is made perfect in weakness. So let me boast of my insults, my hardships, my misgivings, my faults, my failures, because when I'm weak, I'm strong. And so I began to understand that night. And we started to meet in that group. That was 5 years ago. We met every Wednesday night ever since then. And these men are becoming spiritual leaders of their family. Along the way, I began to work with Chris Cope, who you worked with on Strive at Cardinal Studios. He was there the day I gave my witness a year later. I stood up in that same conference, and with John Sablon, he was the main speaker, and I was the witness. And I shared my story in front of 1,800 men. And it was that day in my life, if you remember in the beginning of all of this, I told you I never knew what I wanted to do. When I walked off that stage, I knew that day what God was calling me to do, and it was to share my life and my story and the things that I'd learned, these everyday struggles that men deal with, and share them with men in an everyday way and bring them in front of the one person that could do something about it, which is Jesus Christ. So that's what I've been doing. There was a deacon here in Memphis that has a show on EWTN, and he asked me to start a podcast. We call it Just a Guy on the Pew. And we've got about 100 episodes or getting close to it now, where we talk about the everyday things that guys deal with and try to help them find Christ in those struggles and help them develop into the men that God created them to be.
Well,
I hope your ears aren't bleeding.
No, I wanted to say somebody in the chat said, "I'm not crying, you're crying," and that's what I wanted to say.
Well, thank you for listening to all that. I know it's a long story.
No,
but
glory to Jesus Christ. It's an honor to hear it. I just removed my face from the video so people could just kind of listen, and just the comments that have been flooding in, John, just from people who are just weeping and right now just talking about it and just praising the Lord Jesus Christ for all the good that he's done in your life.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I'm so excited for this friggin' COVID thing to end so we can get you on stages in front of men, who desperately need to hear you, just like you needed help from that priest that day.
Yeah.
I'd love to take some.
I love to do it.
Yeah. What was that?
Go ahead. I just said I love to do it. I'd love to do it. So yeah, I'm praying for an end for everybody for this COVID stuff.
Yeah. Well, look, let's take some questions. We have a lot of people in the live stream now, and just want to take some questions here. Okay, this question comes from, I think it's Yavia Garcia. Thank you so much for the super chat. He says, "How can I keep people close to me from going through similar situations? Some seem to think natural drug use is positive behavior."
Well, I would say that, first of all, the answer to that, natural drug use is positive behavior, is completely wrong. I mean, we don't need those sort of things in our life to make us feel differently, to make us act differently, to make us happy. That was the thing. I was trying to find happiness, or at least escape from the world, which is a huge problem with men, is escapism. But like trying to escape from my problems instead of just giving them to the Lord and allowing the Lord to do what he wants to do, which is to be that get under that yoke with us and help us with our burdens. So like, as far as what you can do for people, I mean, all you can do is continue to suggest and to try to be an example to them. I get that question a lot. Like, someone I love is caught up in this, and what can I do? How can I get them out of this? And the answer is you can't. People have to make up their minds themselves. They have to come to either a rock bottom like I did, or just they have a moment in their life where they come to clarity. But what you can do is pray for them. You can be a positive influence in their life. You can love them. A lot of times, because we're hurt because of the behavior of the people that are addicted, we turn away. We're angry. We are hateful to them. But we have to realize, like, they've got an issue, and they're not really in control of who they are and what they're doing. There was a lot of nights where I wasn't in control of what I was doing. So we have to love. I mean, my wife, she was very hurt, for the first year and a half after all that went on. There was not a lot of loving conversations or anything. She didn't leave my side. She eventually had her own moment at Cursillo and realized that this had been a grace in our life, even though it was a sort of twisted sort of grace. It was one that allowed us to have a family that she had always been allowed her husband to become this spiritual leader of the family that she'd always wanted. But you just have to love, and it gets hard. That's the hardest part for people that are in a marriage or in a relationship with somebody that's in an addiction. It just becomes hard, but you just have to pray and give it to Jesus and be with those and love those people through it.
This next question comes from Saturday Solitude. He says, "Was Mr. Edwards addicted to pornography on the side? How did he overcome two addictions?" And maybe just to follow up on that, John, I'd ask, as you've kind of processed a lot of this, do you think that there was a similar route that was leading to these behaviors? In other words, were you going to cocaine for a similar reason? Why you were going to porn? And how would you, I mean, maybe this is an obvious question, I don't know, but which one was easier for you to begin to kick, pornography or cocaine?
Pornography was, for sure, because with the cocaine, you've got that physical addiction, like your body hurts, you're sick, you're all you can think about is that. It seems like every time you're in the car, Eric Clapton's cocaine comes on. I mean, there's those things you have to deal with, on a basis every once in a while. But pornography was hard too. I mean, that was something that just became a habit. It was like, okay, wife's going to go to bed, kids are going to go to bed. I'm going to sit here and do this for this amount of time, drinking and doing drugs. And then whenever I decide the night's over, I'm going to shut off all the lights in the house. I'm going to go in this room where I can kind of have one eye down the hallway in case my wife gets up, and I'm going to watch this scene of pornography, and then I'm going to go to bed. And so it just became like brushing your teeth in the morning or something, right? It became another thing. So when I started to stop the main problem in my life, cocaine, like I began to realize like drinking wasn't really the issue in my life. It was an effect of the cocaine. Yeah. Pornography wasn't. I mean, I was addicted in the means of I was watching it every night, but it was easier for me to just say, you know what, this is wrong. I've hurt my wife enough. Like I realize that this chastity doesn't stop. Like when you get married, it's not about having sex before you get married. It's about like living chaste all through your marriage, which includes not looking at pornography and all those other things. So I started to say like, I don't want to hurt my wife anymore in any way. And so I started to kick those things. Now, would I lie and say I don't struggle with those things sometimes coming back where those feelings come back? Yeah, of course I do. I'm human. But evidently, I mean, completely, cocaine was harder to kick. I just had to make my mind up I was going to do it and decide what's more important to me, my wife and my children, and having the life that I've always wanted, or staying mired in these things and eventually dying or losing my life in another way.
Powerful question here from Paula Paz. She says, my husband and I go to AA and Alcoholics Anonymous, respectively, and tuned into this. We're both crying like babies. Whew, glory to God.
Yeah, amen.
I'm wondering so much about your wife. Did she ever get codependency recovery?
She went to Al-Anon for a while. She did. Angela was, like I said, she was very hurt. She kind of looked at it, I remember in the beginning, is like, why do I have to go to something like that? You're the one with the problem, just because she was all acting out of the hurt, right? Like, I mean, that's just, I put her in that position. And that is one important thing I want to say real quickly is I tell a lot of people is you can't be angry at the people you've hurt. I can't stress that enough. Like there's a tendency, I'm changing my behavior. Why don't you see who I'm trying to be? Why don't you see I'm trying to be different? Why? Yeah. But we have to remember we put them in that place, and that we're not going to be able to convince them by our words. It's going to take time in our actions to show somebody that we're truly changing in our lives and we're repentant. But she went to Al-Anon and she began to start to see, okay, this is helping her a little bit deal with the issues of living with an addict. And then it helped us kind of go through this together so she could see what I was hearing and what was going on with me during these 30 days. But yeah, she did go through Al-Anon, and then she had her family and some close friends that gave her support as well.
God, glory to God.
Yeah.
Warrior Woman asks, for the addict watching this and those living with addicts, what is the first step in prayer and in getting support? Maybe, I know you've touched upon this, but... Sure.
I would say, honestly, vulnerability, like we talked about. There's a lot of times we don't want to admit to ourselves we have problems. There were so many nights where I was sitting there at 2:00 in the morning with a half a bag of cocaine in front of me, knowing I had to go to work in 3 or 4 hours, and I had to be a father and a husband and all that. But I could convince myself again and again, well, this isn't a problem. This isn't a problem. This is normal. Other people do this, right? We convince ourselves that's the worst part of an addiction, or one of the worst parts, is you just continue to lie to yourself. So you have to be vulnerable. You have to eventually say, like, God, I know I have a problem. Well, first of all, you have to tell yourself, I have a problem. I know I do, and I'm not going to hide it anymore. I'm not going to wait for the other shoe to drop. I'm going to be proactive about it, and I'm going to do something about it. And that next step, I always tell people, is to be vulnerable in the confessional, is to take it to the priest, and take it to the person of Jesus Christ and ask for his help. That's the only thing I think that can ever really get you broken free from an addiction, is to surrendering completely and totally to Jesus Christ. Is I need your love. I need your help. I need your strength. I cannot do this on my own. And then I think you need another group of people. There's 3 things: yourself, God, and others. I had that group of men. I went in the room that night and I shared my story with them, and those guys became my brothers. They're some of my best friends in the world. Those guys, like, can you imagine? Like, I want people that are afraid to be vulnerable to never be afraid of what you have to say, or afraid of saying anything. Like, you don't want to go out on a parade and shout, I'm addicted to porn. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. But like being able to just have a place where you can go and be completely yourself and know that people are going to receive you there. for who you are and love you no matter what mistakes you've made, and understand that they're not perfect either. We're coming up on Christmas time here, Matt, and it's one of my favorite things to say is like you start seeing all these Facebook pictures of families where everybody's dressed in an elf outfit and they're smiling, and you're like, there's no way that happened that way. No one was smiling. Kids were getting threatened. Like stuff was breaking. But isn't that the way we want to present ourselves to the world, though? Right? We're fine. We're good. But we're all broken. So I would say you have to be vulnerable with yourself. You have to come to grips with the fact that I have an issue and I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to run from it. I'm not going to pretend it like it's not there anymore. I'm going to do something about it, then take it to God, and then look for other people in your life that you could share with and walk with the way, Christ sent people out 2 by 2 is to support each other. And we need that same thing in our life.
I want to take another question here from Ryan
Sure.
Pope. Before we do, I just want to say to everybody who's watching this, whether you're watching this now live or later, if you think that this story needs to be shared, then I just ask you to share it right now. Take the link, put it on Facebook, put it on Twitter. I think you'll agree that this could really change somebody's life. So, while I have a vested interest in my videos being shared, and I get that there's a selfish element in that, it really is. I just think that this story is gonna change people's lives. I really believe that. So please help us by sharing this. Ryan Pope, whose question who we're about to answer, or you're about to answer, he was on the North Georgia Pints with Aquinas.
I remember. Yeah, I remember.
Anyway, he sent me this. It's a Dundie Award. So I just want to say thanks to Ryan Pope. It says
awesome.
Dundie Award, Jim Halpert Award, Best Aussie Catholic Apologist Event Host Award or something. So thank you.
Can I say
Thank you,
that's what
Ryan.
she said?
Thank you, Ryan. Ryan says, are you ever still tempted to return to these sins, to cocaine, especially? How has the Spirit used this experience to protect you from these sins on an ongoing basis? Grateful for you, brother.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you, and thank you for everybody that's asking questions and for tuning in and watching. Look, there's times where we're watching a movie or something, and all of a sudden a guy will come out, or a show, and a guy's doing cocaine, and I'll feel a little tingle run down my spine, right? Like but here's the thing: I look over at my wife, and I look over at my children, and I look at this incredible life that God has allowed me to have now. Like I've traveled all over the United States and Canada speaking. I get to work with men and women all the time and help them develop a relationship with Christ. And I would never trade that. Like I would never trade the happiness and the joy I have in my life now. We're told as humans a lot, as people, in general, maybe your father or people in your life told you this, that, people can't change. It's impossible for people to change. But like I'm a living testimony of the power that's not true. Like Christ can do all things. And when we allow him to do that in our life, like our life becomes so blessed. Like Matt, I know you know what I'm talking about. Like you get to do this every day. You get to serve the Lord in this way. And it's just, there's a joy and a happiness that comes with working in the vineyard and with being the person that God calls you to be. Like, I think that's what I was always looking for. I was searching for who am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? And when I found it, and the only person that can reveal that to you is Christ, then there's a happiness that comes where you don't need that other stuff. You don't need the booze. You don't need drugs. You don't need porn. Like your fulfillment comes in the very one that can fill that hole in your heart or in your life, Jesus Christ. And so, there are temptations, but the minute they come, I begin to think, I counter them, right? Like Jesus always said, shove scripture down the devil's throat. Well, I shove these memories, these amazing moments I've had with Christ and the relationship I have now. I know Jesus Christ, and I wouldn't trade that for anything.
Yeah. Tom says, this isn't a question, but I was just wondering if you guys could please say a quick prayer for me. I'm losing hope on breaking my porn addiction. So, Lord Jesus Christ, I give you thanks and praise. I worship you. I bless you. I praise you. I thank you that you know Tom and that you've come and died and have been risen from the dead so that Tom could spend eternity with you. I ask that you would give him courage, that you would give him hope, and that you would help him to be free of this sin and to trust in your tremendous love. Amen. I just want to tell people about this Strive program. I don't make any money from it. That's not why I'm doing it. There's a lot of people right now asking in the chat about breaking free of porn.
Sure.
So to everybody out there, I have a course called strive21.com. It's a 21-day detox from porn course that I wrote and filmed. Basically, every day you get 3 to 5 minute videos from me that lead you over the course of 21 one days, and you are thrown into this course with all these men. We have right now 24,800 men going through the course. Every day there's a challenge to perform. It's 100% free. As I say, I'm not making money from this. I used to, but then we sold it to Covenant Eyes, and I'm glad we did that, because even though now I don't make money from it, we were able to pump this thing out. And so I just want to say that if you're a man who struggles with porn or lust in any way, go to strive21.com and start today. It's about bloody time. Like John was saying, that we take responsibility, and we choose to begin to taste freedom, choose to be different, It's free. You can be as anonymous as you want. So just the same anonymity that's led you into porn use can lead you into recovery. Now, I'm not pretending this is a silver bullet. Nothing is. But, it'll help. If you go to the reviews up here, you can scroll down and read what all these blokes have been saying who have completed the course. So if you're not yet convinced, check that out. Anyway, so we're hoping to come up with one for women, one for wives of those who struggle with porn, but I just want to throw that out there. Strive21.com. If you struggle with porn or lust in any way, check it out. Strive21.com. Man, glory to God, eh?
Yeah. Amen. Strava is a great program too. I used to work with Cardinal and help get that.
Gosh, I forget that you were working for Cardinal when we produced that. Man,
sure.
I'm
It's
so
like
sorry,
the seven whatever of Kevin Bacon, right? Like you and I have met like 15 different times in 15 different ways. But it was. I personally saw a lot of men helped with that program, and a lot of men's groups that adapted it, and even in my own group I was talking about on here. Like I know several of the guys that have paired up and gone through it, and it's been tremendously helpful. So, and I've been through it, and it helped me a lot too. So,
glory to Jesus Christ. I'm happy to hear it. Chewy Cinnamon Schaefer, probably not their real name, says,
if it was, it'd be pretty cool.
My dad got sober in 2003. He went through 12 steps. I hope you always know what a grace it is to your family too for getting sober. I am very grateful to the Lord for helping my dad. Oh, yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Praise God.
It's amazing how many people deal with this, Matt, that are behind closed doors and we just don't know about, right? People you work with, people that you're friends with, and a lot of times we just don't share, and people don't know, and they suffer through this, whether it's themselves or someone they love. That's why it's so important to be able to share and to find people in your life that you can confide in, so that you can help somebody find the Lord and get past this stuff.
It's my mum would say something to me. I used to work at the checkouts in Woolworths in Port Pirie, South Australia. And Mum said something that sounds super kind of cliche or maybe a little simplistic. She said, always be nice to people, because you never know, that person could have just gotten told that they've got cancer, Yeah. And you might hear that and think, well, that's pretty bloody far-fetched. I mean, the probability is pretty low, I'm sure. Yeah. But, like, we all are struggling. Like, we're all dealing with something. Mm-hmm. And if you just realize, and again, I know this is cliche, but that we're all in a battle, literally. If you're a Christian, you believe that to be the case, then, we got to start looking people in the eyes, and saying hello,
Yeah, it's like, that's the thing, the lie of the devil. That's what he tells you, is you're the only person that has a drinking problem. You're the only person that has a porn problem. You're the only person that's got any sort of problem. But it's not the truth. And yet we walk around all day long trying to put up these facades when we waste so much energy and time and effort in trying to keep these things up, instead of just having the freedom to be who you are and figuring out who your identity is in Christ. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all beloved sons and daughters of God the Father. Yeah. And when we find our identity in that and we work from that, then all this other stuff, the freedom just to be yourself and to be happy with who that is, is amazing.
To this Chewy Cinnamon Schaffer.
Sure.
I would just say to her, if you don't mind me suggesting this, I would say, not to you, I'm talking to this girl here, please go tell your dad that you love him, and maybe tell him you respect the heck out of him for making this choice to choose to get sober, because I think one of the things that prevents us from being vulnerable, it's just like, if you knew who I was, you wouldn't stick around, and it just takes so much courage for people to be this honest. And so I think it's important that the people, surrounding these folks and ourselves, just kind of, So, here's Stephen Lucas says, I have been Protestant all my life, 34 years, and am praying about converting Matt, you're helping me so much. Thank you, brother. Glory. Hey, John, maybe you could just share a word to Stephen because you're a convert from Protestantism.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
What would you say to him?
Yeah, man, I'll tell you what, as much as I love my Baptist faith, and I did, I still have lunch once a month with now the pastor of that church. He was my youth minister, Jeff Williamson, great guy. So I'm still connected there with the folks that I grew up with in some ways. But I would tell you, like, becoming Catholic was the completion of my faith. I mean, just to find the truth and the beauty and the goodness that's here in the church. I mean, I think I read like 40 books when I made my mind up. After Angela let me come home, I read 40 or 50 books in the first year on the church and what it meant. And I just began to see all these things in pieces that I didn't know myself. Like, I always thought, like, is there something missing, or is there something I'm not getting, or just always felt like there was another part of the story I wasn't getting. And then, when I really started to embrace my faith, that's when things started to click, right? Like John 6 and all of those things that didn't make sense or were kind of pushed away before, it all comes together in this beautiful masterpiece. And it's the fullness of truth. Like, I've never felt closer to the Lord in my life than I do in the Catholic Church and being in full communion with it. And I just tell you, like, if you're looking for just to know more and to really feel closer to Christ than you ever have, like, I guarantee you'll find that in the Catholic Church. Like, start looking up the church fathers, and you're going to put a lot of things together that make sense, and you're going to start realizing that this is what's been going from the beginning of time, and this is a place that we need to be.
JJ Otomo says, I struggled so much with porn and lust. I was baptized a year ago, but still feel like I'm lost. I don't fail as much anymore, but it really hurts when I do. Oh, man, I think it's so important that we realize that freedom from sexual impurity is not so much like a finish line, but it's a daily choice that we make by, our choices. Like you were saying, what kind of man do I want to be, And so I would just say to this bloke here or who wrote in, if you fall, don't look at yourself because you'll fall into despair, and don't look at other people who are doing worse than you because you'll fall into pride, but look to Jesus Christ who loves you. Get up and keep moving forward, and realize that 10 steps forward, because it sounds like this person's making progress, 10 steps forward and 1 step back does not equal 11 steps back.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, God bless you. Here's Elise from the Netherlands says, I was wondering, how did your marriage change as a result of your own healing process?
Beautifully. I mean, I can't tell you. I shared this with Matt and Cameron, when we were through telling the story down in Georgia, but it's better than I ever thought it could be, right? I mean, Angela and I are better friends than we've ever been. I mean, we pray together. We're equally yoked, right? Like, Angela just started a Walking with Purpose Bible study at our parish, and just this beauty that's come out of this understanding and it flows from our love of the Lord, right? It makes our love stronger. And so our marriage has just been in a place I never thought it could be. I mean, if you asked me when she let me come home, what will this ever look like? Will we ever be close again? Will we ever be, as intimate as we were? I would have told you, I don't know. But I could tell you right now that I'm married to my best friend, and that our kids are the recipient of that, right? That our kids are being brought up in the way that they always should have been, with the Lord first in their life. I mean, it's something powerful to have two people that are on the same page and raising children the way that God calls us to. I used to run. I used to go do other things so I wouldn't be here, right? But now I don't want to do other things. All I want to do is be here with my wife and my children and just soak up all this that I can, because I took it for granted for so long. So it's in a wonderful place, yeah.
Well, hey, as we wrap up today, John, please
Sure.
tell people about your podcast and how they can learn more from you, learn more about you.
Sure. Yeah, well, you can go to justaguyonthepew.com. That's where you can find all the podcasts. I've got daily video reflections I've done over the last couple of years on the gospel readings. We're coming up with a program now that's going to come out next year based on virtue, moving guys from good to great. So we're excited about that. We also have an ebook that you can download there, the 12 ways to get closer to Jesus. But you can find the podcast there. It comes on weekly. And then also you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all of those things. But you can do it all right there from the Just a Guy on the Pew website page.
Lovely. Well, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and do us a favor,
Sure.
please share this video so that it can get out to more people. I just want to let you know that next week we have a couple of big episodes. One with Jonathan Rumi from The Chosen. You may have seen that series on the New Testament. And then we're also having Carlo Broussard talk about purgatory. He's just written an excellent book about purgatory, so if you've wondered why Catholics believe what they do about purgatory, or if you've been trying to explain purgatory to a Protestant friend, this will definitely help you. So if you're watching, please do us a favor, click subscribe, click that bell button. That way you'll be sure not to miss an episode. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Great to be with you.